All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, a submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Semmel?
It's Friday, so we've got Towers of Midnight starting in chapter 33. And I've been so crazy busy that I noticed when I opened my computer to do this, I never posted the last video. So they're going to go up to back to back. Uh,
Oopsie.
yeah. And so you'll get Social and Wheel of Time on the same day.
Um, Theoretically a quickie, because Sam's trying to leave town, and I theoretically have to put pants on and be a productive human being at some point. Also because the what's going on in these chapters is kind of interesting, but
There were comments I wanted to get to. I forgot to bring them up, but let's do those first because I think one was pretty relevant. But go ahead and
okay.
go through your intro. I'll
Um,
bring those back up.
it's also uh some of it's kind of blah because there's a lot of White Tower and Elayne stuff that make us go ugh. Um, but then there's also uh the I'm trying to remember what happens when, but I feel like this book, and it kind of makes sense because of where we're at in the overarching story. Towers of Midnight kind of has like three different climaxes, giggity. Um, so where the chapters we're in, Perrin and Egwene's storylines are converging in very similar to Fires of Heaven, the way Nynaeve and Rand and Matt's stories converge in Camelin when they go after Ravine. Something similar happens here, but then there's still a big chunk of book left to go. So there's not a ton to talk about, in part because there is quite a bit of action. So the last couple of chapters, I only have a couple of notes on. Um, but then also because some of the stuff that we see with Perrin is, we would just be retreading old ground of this is good Perrin, this is bad Perrin, this is why. It's, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah, and
same old, same old.
this brings me to the first comment. The one I wanted to do before we started was there's only so many ways we can criticize Sanderson until the next jarring deficiency, I'm dried up, which goes right into what you just said. And actually that I thought that one kind of hit because we have been spending a lot of time beating that dead horse. And I almost wonder it from my own perspective, had I never watched the video where he was doing the autographs while he was talking, if I would have the same opinion. I don't know if that
Mm.
tainted it or not, but everybody else seems to kind of have the same opinion too. But yeah, we'll go ahead and pull back on the Sanderson hate job. But we have been trying to be better about giving him credit when he did something well. So we'll still make sure that we put that in when we need to do it. So yeah, I think we're all kind of tried up on it. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, we've got a book and a third left to go. Let's see. Read the Recluse stories gives whole new outlook to order and chaos. Have you ever heard of those?
No, I'll have to look those up.
Yeah, I think when we're done with this, and I have room for fiction again, I will put a note on that. Uh, Guys, it's not the heat, it's the humidity. Kidding. I know it's hackneyed, but it's also true. Yeah, well, and here's part of the science behind it. The reason you sweat is when it evaporates, it cools you down. When it's humid, it doesn't evaporate. So you never cool down, you just sweat, sweat, sweat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. A lot of people in my community, the biology community, are like, we're a tropical species. That's why global warming is not a big deal. It's like, yeah, technically we are kind of a tropical species, but there are some of us with ancestries where they spent the last 6,000 years in a colder environment, and that's why we have less melanin in our skin and we sweat more when it's hot. So yeah, yeah, 6,000 years isn't a lot for adaptation, but it's enough that sexual selection can select for some of these things. Maybe not the mutation evolution route, but the people that were selected for because they collected more vitamin D from the sun also have trouble with the heat a little bit more. Uh, the series is shite as my Norwegian grandmother would say, or godmother would say, the series is shite. Yes, we don't. That's a dead horse. We don't need to beat again until it's back on. Which I see advertisements. I don't know the date yet, but
Yeah, I can't even believe that it's getting a third season, but I guess if it's already paid for,
yeah, there's still so many hangers on too. They're like that. I think are like us. Like, can it get better? Has it been so far down that it only has up to go?
mhm.
And realistically, from a curiosity standpoint, the series is shite, but I almost want to see which things they try to fix and which things they don't.
it's
It
it's shocking to me that the same studio that made this and Rings of Power also made Reacher and well, because technically they didn't make, they're just, executive producers and giving it a platform, but Reacher was done by other people. Clarkson Farm is done by him and his team, you know. So those are really good, but I think it's clear that there is way too much Amazon Studios and Jennifer Salke involved in Rings of Power and Wheel of Time, and it's clear, and it's clear that that's the problem, and nothing is going to change so long as you know the 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 carcass rots from the head down, and it's rotten up top. So
Mhm.
nothing's going to change as far as that's concerned.
Well, if you listen to Drinker, he says the ship is righting, but his says on a timeline of about 3 years. Like everything
Mm.
that's starting to go better now won't show up for about 3 years. And so that if I hope he's right, I can wait 3 years if things
But
get
I
better.
think that that is more of a holistic view of pop culture media holistically. I think
Well,
individual
he said 3 years for
studios,
the actual product to show up better.
yes,
Yeah.
but there are for certain individual studios like Disney and Amazon, I don't expect to see much change there because the top is still entrenched in their ideology and they don't want to change.
Well,
They don't.
except we're getting to the point where I mean, money still matters, and the ones that take that first leap are going to be the ones that make all the money, and that
Well,
can only hold on so long. I think that's where the cultural part follows in a few years, because oh, we're losing all this money, and then the people at top are going, yeah, but we got a message, and eventually people are like, screw your message, we don't have any money. That thing that we buy things with, yeah. So
well, it doesn't matter. And this is, I've pointed this out and complained about this, that one of the reasons that Disney and Amazon are allowed to suck is because those studios are essentially subsidized.
mm.
That BlackRock, which has more assets under management than most countries have GDP, are able to subsidize a falling stock price like Disney because they have so many other assets and they are fully sold on the message. Since you brought up Drinker, same thing with Amazon Studios. Amazon Studios doesn't need to exist. Amazon Studios is a vanity project of Jeff Bezos. Amazon itself is one of the biggest, richest companies in the history of the world. So they can subsidize a studio that's crap, and they can eat that cost in the same way that nobody watches MSNBC. MSNBC regularly has, and I'm not even talking like big time people like Rogan, but just mid tier podcasters get more viewers and listeners than MSNBC does. And yet, MSNBC still exists, and those hosts are still paid way more money than they're worth. Why? Because MSNBC is part of a giant corporation, the heads of which are more interested in the prestige of having a cable news channel and getting their ideology, their message out on that cable news channel. So they don't care that, you know, the top tier shows on MSNBC might get a couple 100,000 viewers, compared to podcasters with way less costs getting millions.
Well, and remember, it's not they don't get their money from the viewers; they get their money from the advertisers. And the advertisers, such as brought to you by Pfizer, are not paying because they get the most people see their commercial and buy their product.
That's a good
They're
point too.
paying to control the message. The same with like Lockheed Martin. Who needs a Lockheed Martin strike drone that's watching, the news, the morning news on CNN, right? How many of those 65-year-olds that are sitting there watching that are in the market for an M2 Abrams or something, So it's
Or in the
not about.
market looking for a job saying, hey, that looks cool, I want to go work there. No, you're the average cable viewer is a senior citizen. Yeah.
Which leads us to the next comment. It needs to be noted that Hillary studied under Saul Alinsky, which, yes,
Yeah, that's
remember
true
the,
too.
the whole point of Saul Alinsky is here are the principles of Machiavelli, but he was maintaining power. Here's
Hmm.
how you use them to gain power. And, love her or hate her, she did that masterfully. She has
Hmm.
more power than almost everybody in this country, even though you forget that she exists sometimes until she pops her head up again, and you're like, oh my God, the snake is still under the rock. So it's yeah. Now the last comment is funny because he says my first wife was the middle of three sisters. While that sounds innocuous, in reality it was always two versus one, with the characters constantly shifting positions. Yeah, you want to see that on a mega scale? Take up my job and do morning boot camps with ladies because you knew who they were talking about by who wasn't there. And that shifted depending on who wasn't there at any given day. And you would think these ladies would be like, hey, they're probably talking about me when I'm not there, but they're not. They Everybody has their own little rumor circles and they're just going and going and going and going. Now, I think that was piggybacking on when I said if you marry a twin, you're never first. Uh, so there's that. But my mom dealt with that, except she was the youngest of five kids and the two sisters, it wasn't constantly shifting. They were always putting her in the middle of their fight, the other two sisters, because they were always fighting and my mom was always stuck in the middle. So she wasn't a side or the other. She just was the sounding horn or or sometimes the scapegoat. Like one would spy on the other and get some information, and then the other would be like, "How'd you know?" And she'd be like, "Oh, Connie told me." It's like, yeah, I've been there too as a trainer where two people getting a divorce that I happen to be in the middle of.
Ugh.
They spy on each other, and one of them, how'd you get that information? Oh, Sam told me. No, I didn't. I'm not talking to either of y'all about that. I actually fired them as clients. I said, I want to be as far from you as I can socially. So it was a
Yeah.
awkward situation. People just do that. I mean, unfortunately, it's more the norm than the exception. But yeah, sisters are the worst at it. Sisters are the brothers beat each other up when they're mad at each other.
Hmm.
Sisters play. This is where they learn the game. This is where they learn the social political game.
Yeah. We beat each other up, but then the fight's over, and so now we can talk for an hour about comic books.
Yeah. All right. So on to the story. That's all the comments.
All right. Um, so chapter
Swan.
33. So on page 509, the first edition hardcover. Um, and it starts with an Egwene point of view. Actually, no, Swan's point of view, but it's about Egwene. And I find it interesting. Uh, I really like Nynaeve being here and seeing her from Swan's point of view rather than getting Nynaeve's point of view of having been just raised officially, having been tested and taken the oaths. And I like getting Swan's perspective on Nynaeve. Um, oh, also, this is random, and I don't know if I missed this and if you caught it. And if not, Scott, do you know when this happened? But I noticed this last time we got a Nynaeve chapter too, and I don't remember when did she cut her hair? Because
Wasn't it mostly burned off in the test? And she said it'll
oh,
take a while for the braid to grow back. She went to reach
was
for
that
it
when it
after the
was?
test. Yeah, I think it got
Okay.
singed off and she cut it where it was singed. Because then she
Okay.
makes a comment later where she goes to grab it and she goes, it was awkward.
Because there's a moment in here where someone notices her reaching like she's reaching for her braid, but it barely passes her shoulder. And
Hmm.
and then I remembered, wait, there was something about that last time too. What did I miss?
The last
Yeah.
part of the test was lots of fireballs, remember?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Um I the 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 thing that jumped out at me in this section here before we switch to Perrin is actually the end here where Nynaeve tries to bring up Rand
Hmm.
as they're setting out their plans for um, springing a trap on Masana by using themselves as bait. And Mother Nynaeve said, "Perhaps Rand, this is a matter of the tower." Nynaeve, Egwene interrupts her. "We will manage it." Well, wait, except that you just earlier talked about getting the wise ones to help you. So it's not just a matter of the tower. It's a matter of you and your pride.
Hmm.
And and because they were just talking about how Rand has changed. Nynaeve makes the point that I didn't like a lot of the things he did, especially lately, but I could at least see how he got there, which is a very clever way of answering Sawan's unspoken criticism of Nynaeve, because Nynaeve has this thought, or Sawan has this thought that it's good that Nynaeve is back in the tower because she takes his side too often. Except that's important. It's it's not that
Yeah,
she's taking his side; it's that she can see how he got there, and you need to
it's
know that.
it's classic John Stuart Mill. The solution for my bias is other people's bias. The problem with Egwene is she keeps trying to surround herself with yes men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are a couple of times where that's going to pop back up, but I do find it interesting that I mean, Nynaeve makes the point that, or is it Egwene who makes the point? Um, no, yeah, Egwene makes the point. Okay, um, they're talking about how he's changed, and Nynaeve says, "Yes, the Aiel say he's embraced death," which is going to come back up again later, and I'll talk more about that. Um, and Egwene says that she's heard that and that there was something different about his eyes when uh when he came to the tower, to the hall. He didn't seem like one to destroy Natron's barrow. Someone shivered as she thought of that. The man I saw wouldn't need to destroy such a place, Egwene said. Those inside would just follow him, bend to his wishes because he was. It almost seems to me in that with that in mind that how much of this is pure ego on Egwene's part of I need to do this, and how much of this is worry that he will undermine my authority because he bends people to his will now.
I'd say it's 50-50. And the part of her that's consciously thinking about it is the former. And the part of her that's driving it emotionally is the latter, which is the way we make a lot of our decisions.
Mm-hmm. Um, then we shift
And
to
this is
not.
where I'm going to give her credit. Okay. I'm going to
Yeah.
give Egwene a little credit here because we've talked about the process of how she got to where she is. And now she has a weakness because of it. Because it would be hard for me if I had, 3 or 4 employees or something that came in that were raw and new or from different backgrounds or something, and one of them would tell me, "Oh, you need to do this thing differently." That would be very hard for me because I spent the last 16 years developing what I do
Mhm.
the hard way, and she spent the last whatever 2 years coming to where she is in a position the hard way.
Oh yeah.
She was given the Amaryllin seat to begin with, but she was given it with a bunch of strings, and she earned the spot she had. by actually fighting the harder battle of breaking those strings than actually just working her way to the top over
Well,
time in the
and
White
don't
Tower.
forget, we made a big point back in the Great Hunt of being collared by the Sanchin. That was a big effing deal and going to be very critical in how it Egwene is shaped going forward, how the girl becomes Egwene, the woman
That
going
was the
forward.
catalyst that allowed it to happen so fast.
Yes.
But the actual work she did to do it was the work of 20 years of 30 years in a short
Crammed
period
into
of
two
time.
years. Yeah.
And so, but there's a difference in mindset, and this is where I'll pull away from her a little bit. I've always tried to approach those situations with a little bit of stubbornness, because stubbornness is good to an extent, but in a, okay, so let me just set the bar for your criticism of me. Here's how I got to this position and what I went through to do it from an intellectual standpoint. You have to equal that to change my mind. And that I try to have that stance. And the problem is you kind of shift the bar depending on your ego and what mood you're in at the time. But I try to
Mm-hmm.
at least do that, and Egwene's not doing that here. Like, this is what I had to go through to be here. She kind of scapegoats to Elida a couple times in this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you can bring up Elida and you can bring up the shit she messed up for everybody,
Which is
but
true.
not only when it's convenient.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
So I
so
guess I
then
just
we,
gave a seriously backhanded compliment, but
yeah,
there was a little compliment in
but
there, I guess.
not wrong. And then we switch to Perrin's point of view, who is not coincidentally training to get better in the world of dreams.
Hmm. Okay, so this one, it's not a Sanderson critique. This is might be a Jordan critique on my part. One of the hard parts about reading this is it's one of those instances where you feel like you went through before because of Egwene's
Mm-hmm.
training. It's like, oh well, we're back in book 4, because we're learning the same things Egwene did. Well, Hopper was already dead in book 4. That could have been part of Perrin's storyline
Mm-hmm.
at the time, and you could have had both going on at the same time. And then it
That's
would
a
have
good
been
point.
like, oh, this is how the Dreamwalkers are teaching it, and this is how Hopper's teaching it, and this is the differences. And then later, when we get to the end result, which we'll get to, it's not a spoon, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you get to later, it's like, that's where the animal world was different
Yes.
versus the human world. But to have to revisit it, and basically it isn't real. It isn't real. It isn't real. Take your mind out of it. All the stuff we kind of went through with Egwene, and
Mm-hmm.
then we went through with the Tower sisters who had to do it, and then we went
Mm-hmm.
through, with Nynaeve and Elayne and the menagerie as they're getting good with the ring. Could have done it all at the same time, and then had that aha moment come back up later.
Yeah. Um, to that point, it is useful though that the line that jumped out at me is on page 513. He keeps repeating to himself, "It wasn't real. It wasn't real." Um, but he says at the top of the page, they weren't real. He knew, just figments, but it was hard. Yeah, because that's how your mind works. That's how the brain works. You can know what you need to do, but that doesn't mean it makes it easy to do it. As we said before, health and fitness isn't complicated, but it's not easy. The basics of it are incredibly simple to grasp. Don't eat crap, don't eat too much, get some activity and exercise. All right, now you're a healthy person, right? Well, no, because actually doing that isn't that easy.
Mm-mm. Oh no, it's actually okay. So you'll see this in the social episode we just did, because I talk about the message coming for you on high when we talk about hunger. It's not only incredibly difficult, it's counterintuitive, even though it seems simple when you say it out loud, like you just said, eat less crap. Oh, except I'm designed to eat crap. Oh, that sucks. And my brain, which controls most of my body, tells me, hey, go eat that.
Mhm.
Same like you would have in the, I mean, this is almost like we go to the meta level. Jordan's use of the world of dreams can be kind of a parallel to the discussions right now we're having about what is actual consciousness. What is how we perceive the world? because the Buddhist would tell you it's a bubbling up of the underlying emotion. And the neuroscientist would say that's probably right. And whichever system in the brain has the biggest signal at that moment is the one that controls the action. And well, yeah, okay, I can tell myself it's not real consciously, but I'm feeling wet and I'm feeling cold as he's in the water, right? Isn't he?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm feeling wet. I'm feeling cold. I'm feeling all these things that are water. But my brain is trying to go, no, it's not real. It's not real, but it's real to me. I can feel it.
Hmm.
And you have to be able to separate those things.
Yep. Um,
Was you talk
Speaking
about
of,
fasting? Am I hungry because I'm hungry, or am I hungry because I feel hungry? Did I smell something and all of a sudden I'm hungry? Or am I hungry because my blood sugar is low and my stomach has been empty for a while and my liver is running out of glucose and all of those things that are actually real hunger? They feel the same.
yes,
They feel the same because when your
that's a
brain
good
tells you
point.
you're hungry, it feels exactly the same as when your body tells you you're hungry.
That's a good point. Feels exactly the same. Uh, then we switch to Gawyn and Elayne.
Did I already
Luckily,
use
it's
the?
not long.
Yeah, I used the she deserves him. That's why I like
Yep,
Gawyn is because she deserves him.
yep,
Yeah.
yep, yeah. Um, but it at least we get something of a resolution here, where I like that Elayne calls him out of seriously, bro. You're talking about the man I love and the father of my children, your nephews and nieces. That he is not this evil monster you think he is. You're just being a selfish jerk. So you want to challenge him to a duel? Okay, then you kill him. Then what? What happens at the last battle, dummy? Um,
Yeah,
at,
and this is where Gawyn is still even further down the rails because he was a sharp guy in book one. Yeah, he had his weaknesses and stuff, and but
yeah.
he was at least intelligent. That is just the least intelligent thing someone can say in light of the things going on in the world.
On page 520, Elaine tells him, uh, that that's not just jealousy, Gawyn. It's selfishness. We can't afford to be short-sighted right now. This, he said, coming from the woman who personally raided the Black Ajah. Elaine blushed, as well she should. It was needed. And besides, I did say we. You and I, we have this trouble. Um, yeah, yeah, you do. It No, it's everyone else I've ever trusted who are wrong. Yes.
That
Yes.
might be today's meme.
The your sister, who you are devoted to and honor bound to, and the woman you claim you love and want to marry are all telling you he's not the monster you think he is. They're all wrong. Um, it is interesting though, because kind of something I noticed here that I'll point out a little later is keep this in mind when we get to the trial, because it just kind of dawned on me there's a parallel between Morgase's fall and Gawyn's fall, but then look at how they react to it and overcome it, or not in Gawyn's case. Doesn't really overcome it. He
There's a
just
slight
works around
parallel,
it.
but maybe Gawyn is overcome with jealousy and emotion, and he's hijacked by that.
Hmm.
Morgase was hijacked by something a little different because
Yes, yes.
the end result was the same, but one was malevolently done by someone who had a lot of extreme metaphysical power,
Hmm.
and the other is just normal human emotion that we
Hmm.
should be able to get past every once in a while.
Right, which
Yeah.
is why it's so stark if you think about it in those terms, because what happened to Morgase was so much worse, and yet she overcame it, and Gawyn
She
is
was
still.
taken advantage of.
Hmm.
He is putting himself in the position,
Yeah, that's true too.
which women take
Um,
advantage of men, and Egwene's an asshole to him. But at the same time, he has a lot more choice in this matter than Morgase did.
mhm. Um, Something else that kind of jumped out at me at this exchange between Elayne and Gawyn, when Elayne has to be the good guy here and the voice of reason, is that this sounds so much more like the early Elayne, the Elayne we see in books 2 through 5,
Hmm.
when we first meet Elayne and we see her out in the world. And I wonder if, again, kind of the purpose of Elayne becoming who she becomes in the second half of the series is, yeah, you're not really supposed to like her as much anymore. She does become a flawed person, and if this is kind of uh, an illustration of how power corrupts, so that even the good ones eventually kind of become captured by the station and the system. Same thing that you see with Egwene and that we've complained about is she doesn't seem like the same person. Well, she is and she isn't. That person is still there, but now that person, because another thing I that kind of popped in my head while we were talking is, think about Elayne in book 4, the very beginning of Shadow Rising, when she's tutoring Rand basically on how to
Hmm.
be a ruler versus the way she's actually acting as a ruler. And something she criticizes Egwene for, of Egwene, you can't do everything by yourself. Okay, Elayne, pot kettle, you
Hmm.
know. So she's not she has trouble practicing what she preaches, because now that she actually has the power, it kind of has corrupted her.
I will say again from experience running a business, the more that's on the line with something, the harder it is to delegate, but the more
Yes.
important it is to
Yes.
delegate. There's so many times I made the wrong decision and just did something myself because there was so much on the line that I didn't want it to screw up, but then I overextended myself and it screwed up. That was that is I will tell you that is the hardest part of leadership. Asking people to do things and teaching them, that's not that hard. If you know your stuff, teaching somebody how to do it is not that hard. But then asking them to do it in your name, oh my goodness. That's why we have the commandment, do not use the Lord's name in vain, because the people can't do it right. You know, it's that I understand that from a human level.
Yeah.
I guess our criticism is they need to, if you're going to be one of the most important people in a continent, you need to transcend those
Yes.
hard things for humans.
Well, and that's why Elayne is telling Gawyn what she really needs is someone she can trust with her whole heart and mind, so that she doesn't have to worry about what's happening. And someone who not only can, and this is, Elayne is actually giving good marital advice, even if she doesn't realize it, of not only do what she needs done, but anticipate and do what needs done without asking.
Well,
But
there's a double-edged sword to this though, because when you say when people say I need someone I can trust with completely, there's two ways that can manifest. Child buyer is
mm,
Bornhold's hound, right?
mhm, mhm.
He is a zealot of the White Cloaks, and Bornhold can just point and he would use his axe. That's trusting with everything. That is 100% trust, but that has a negative result. Where what these people need is someone they can trust to come forward and say, like Nynaeve just did to Egwene, no, you're wrong on this. Now there's a different kind of trust because you're
Mhm.
trusting that person to do it in good faith, not just because they're being a contrarian or they have their own aims. And I think that's where Elayne's kind of off here. She's like, I need you to be this thing that you were supposed to be. But in essence, she also goes on to describe that it's kind of a sword in my hand, the blade of the Queen of Andor or whatever,
Yeah.
the first captain or whatever. Gareth Bryan did it right because he argued with Morgase. Whereas Elaine's kind of saying, Gawyn, I need you to be this thing that I can point in this direction. And so that youth does that. Youth is part of it. But again, we need these people to transcend that.
Mhm. Speaking of not transcending, um, towards the end of the chapter, I I kind of chuckled at this because I like it, but it's also kind of dumb, which is he has this moment after Elayne leaves of saying, "I'm done with you, Althor," and he says he feels like a great weight has been lifted. But then he gets the letter from Egwene, which is from written by Sylviana, and on page 527, he says that he can't go back now, not when it would look as if he'd come crawling back at her command. Okay, well, I guess that weight wasn't really lifted, was it? Because you're still acting like yourself. But that's accurate. You don't get these moments like you do in the movies where it's just I'm gonna make a change, and then you do.
Mhm.
You can say all those words of affirmation you want, but that doesn't actually
That
make it
that's
stick.
one of the things that's wrong with therapy right now. There's such a big push to let go of the past, do this, and say I am done with you, abusive parent or whatever. And it's like
Hmm.
that's not how trauma holds on to you.
Hmm.
The times it does the worst for you are the times you don't notice it's working on you. And that's so yeah, but there's this big push of we can have these affirmations. Like, no, affirmations may get you started, uh, but at the same time, for to defend Gawyn on that, that's the proper response because no, he shouldn't go crawling back as soon as she calls because she told him to leave.
Hmm.
And the problem is ultimately he does crawl back.
Well, he doesn't crawl back. He goes running back when he realizes what's going on, but that's we probably won't get there yet. Chapter 34, we finally get to the trial with Perrin. Um, I I like right at the beginning, the top of page 529, he's walking with Daniel and he says, "My wife has you mixed up in her plots to protect me, I assume." Daniel started, "How? She needs her secrets," Perrin said. "I miss half of them, but this one was as plain as day. She's not happy about this trial. What's she got you doing? Some plan with Ashaman to get me out of danger?" And then he basically tells Daniel, "Yeah, look, I understand, but you're not going to do it on your own. You wait for my signal because I don't want anyone jumping the gun and having an accident turn into a massacre,
Mhm.
right?" Um,
We don't need a Lexington, right?
or what was it? The final battle of Arthur, as the legend goes, he's he's having a parlay with his son, uh, and a I think that there's like a black adder that shows up, and one of the knights draws his sword and kills the snake before it can bite someone. But that the armies were told to stand back unless weapons are drawn. Well, a weapon was drawn, so now they attack. And I can't remember Camlin Fields was it? Because Camelin was a similar name to that. But anyway,
Mhm.
that was the final battle where Arthur is killed. Um, One of the cooler moments in the movie Excalibur, which good classic fantasy,
Oh yeah, yeah.
with some awesome armor and weapons for the kudos to the prop department on that one.
Yeah, I think of the the scene in one of my favorite scenes in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Helm's Deep, where they're all holding their bows and the old guy just let's go and hits the one orc and he falls down. Everybody just kind of looks up confused and then they all charge. It's like,
Yep. Um, what I like about this is that this shows good progression. This is Perrin understanding and accepting,
mhm.
and how the opposite of Gawyn here is that look, he's finally, yeah, it was kind of funny when he got the advice from the older men of how to be a married man, of pick your battles and let her think she's winning, which is the exact same thing that
That the women's
Marin
circle
says
would
to
say, yeah,
Fael.
yeah.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, that's how it works. And you actually see that later after the trial when he stands up to her, when he yells at her and says, "No, this is the way it had to be. There were no good choices. This is the least bad option." So,
Well,
but this
and
isn't worth the fight.
and not knowing who he dealt with the person he was dealing with in the proper way because
Hmm.
Galad needed the trial.
Hmm.
Gallad needed the trial as much as Perrin needed the trial because
Hmm.
Gallad is all about doing the just thing. And if he's found guilty at the trial, the just thing is to kill him. If he's
Hmm.
found innocent, then I cannot be just in still going forward with this battle.
Yeah. Um, the downside to this little moment is that this is one of the frustrations with Perrin's storyline in the second half of the series is we have this nice progression here with his relationship with Fail, with him growing as a man in that way, but then we don't get that progression elsewhere. We don't get that progression of him as a man, as a leader. To wit, just after that, he's having this thought, and where is it? Yeah, just after he talks to Daniel, um, I'm just he trailed off thinking in his head, I'm just a what? A blacksmith? Could he say that anymore? What was he? This is ultimately Perrin's uh uh crisis as a character. His conflict is this, what am I? The problem was how long it took and how repetitive it got for him to get to this moment. Because that line really jumped out at me, and that's his whole frustration with being a leader is this continued clinging to, I'm just a blacksmith, but you're not, and you haven't been for a long time.
Yeah, but there is some payoff to kind of his arguments during the trial because
Mm-hmm.
his argument basically is the blacksmith's puzzle.
Yep.
I am pieces to the part, and when all the parts come together, this is the final product. And the parts work differently if they're in a different situation. It would just, I mean, that's a good argument. That's a pretty good
No, you're
argument.
not a blacksmith anymore, but that is still part of you. And in fact,
Mhm.
my thought here was, since we just left Gawyn, was he's facing the same conundrum as Gawyn, but this is what happens when that same conundrum is faced by someone who's not a moronic doofus.
Mhm.
Because, like Galad, Perrin already has a solid core. So he's faced with the exact same conundrum, just kind of a different twist to it, because Perrin's is, or Gawyn's is this frustration and jealousy that this dumb sheep herder gets all the glory, and here I am getting stuck and just pulled along by the current, and I'm not doing the great things that I thought I would be doing with my life. And Perrin's is kind of the inverse of that, of I don't want the great things. I want my simple life, but I can't do that. So he has to face that, and he has to overcome that. And the reason he's able to is the same reason Gawlid is eventually able to overcome his uh biases, whereas Bayer can't. He just can't, because Gallad has this strong core. So he's able to look at what's going on and think, something's not right here. I need to figure this out, and I need to figure it out this way, because my morals aren't wrong. My moral code isn't what's wrong here. It's just how I'm applying it is wrong. What I'm doing with it is wrong. So it makes it possible for these two men to overcome this crisis of confidence, if you will. Um, and a couple pages later, um, at the end of Perrin's section here, before it switches to Fail's point of view, I it really hits the nail on the head with this point, because he's talking to Gaul, and you changed, Perrin Abara, Gaul said. What's that? This is a good thing, Gaul replied. It is good to see you stop protesting about being a chief. It is better to see you enjoy command. I've stopped protesting because I have better things to do, Perrin said, and I don't enjoy being in command. I do it because I have to. And I love this line. Gaul nodded as if he thought Perrin were agreeing with him. Because you are. You just don't realize it. And
Mhm.
once you realize why you're agreeing with Gaul, that's when you truly become the chief,
Well,
as Gaul is saying.
it's another version of embracing death. Embracing death
That's
doesn't
my
mean you
exact note.
want to die.
Exactly.
It means that it may be necessary.
This is my thought here was this is embracing death, and this is embracing death versus fearing it or versus chasing it. Which is there's something that Rourke says early on, um, something similar to this about how, um, oh, I remember what it is. It's when they barge in to rescue the girls, and Nynaeve, burns those Madral to ash, and they apologize for interrupting the dance, and Rourke is like, young men like to go courting death, like a lover, but as you get older, you realize, yeah, let's not do that.
Yeah, yeah.
you
Your
you
weapon
know death is
your weapon was
inevitable.
as good as mine. We're
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
death is inevitable, but that doesn't mean you go chasing after it. It's just a matter of accepting that life is life. This is the way life works, and it can be unfair and it can suck, but it is what it is. Um, there's also a good line here in Fail's point of view, and we've talked about how she's kind of um changed because of her captivity, uh and kind of hemmed and hawed and wondered and argued about how much of that was there before, but we just didn't see it and we didn't like it because of who we were when we first read her as young men, and not, in much the same way we didn't like Nynaeve as much. But she has this thought on page 532, much like really paralleling Perrin's comment to Daniel about, basically she needs this and I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to make sure it happens the way I want it to. And she has a similar thought when she's arguing with Perrin, which is, uh Fael didn't let her annoyance show. There was a time to be a tempest and a time to be a tender breeze. She had already let Perrin know in no uncertain terms what she thought of this trial. For the moment, she needed to be seen supporting him. And I think that's the measure of wisdom that she's gaining from not just, what Marin told her about how dealing with men, but also she just saw from the outside how her mother acted, and she's kind of trying to emulate that, but she didn't yet understand why her mom was the way she was. And now she's, I think, starting to understand. And that's where she's able to
And this is
act
part
with more nuance, more wisdom.
well, and this is part of why we're so behind as people with the way we do things in the West. We try to learn everything by being taught. We never, I mean, it's just flying away from everybody in the education system right now that maybe experience matters. Maybe trial and error is good.
It's why I was surprised, but also so glad that the hoity-toity big 5A suburban high school here not only had a shop class, but had a big, nice shop to teach shop class in, and a lot of kids take it.
Mhm. Well, I got two new clients. Okay, so riddle me this. Two 11-year-old girls that already have chronic knee pain and back pain. They do ballet and they started very young.
Mm,
When we learn movement patterns as a child in a structured way, it has a different result than when we learn movement patterns in play. Had they danced around on their own
mm.
and mimicked people they saw on TV, their bodies would be in a different place than they are now, having learned it in a structured environment. The exact same movements, exact different result because of the development of how you learn these things. When you're focusing on doing everything right, you're not focused on how the world feels around you.
I finally got around to listening to this podcast I downloaded a while ago from Charles C.W. Cook's podcast, and he's interviewing Tim Carney, who has written for a number of magazines and newspapers, like the Washington Examiner. And he's got a book out called Family Unfriendly: How Our Culture Made Raising Kids Much Harder Than It Needs to Be. And one of the things he talked about a lot was how he talked to a number of pediatricians and pediatric psychologists, and they all said that the 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 single biggest factor in healthy and happy children is independent play. And we don't do that anymore. Everything is structured.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that independent play where you are forced to learn problem solving. You are forced to learn social interaction. Both so and not just the problem solving of interacting with people, but also, to your point, the problem solving of physical uncertainty, climbing a tree
Yeah, I was
versus
going to
climbing
say
a climbing wall.
we can use a broad statement. The problem solving of dealing with your environment. That could include social situations, that it can include physical situations.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's not get down that rabbit hole because we could go down there for hours.
Well,
But
but my point was that the insight she's getting from experience
mm-hmm.
has a different end result than what she learned from being taught.
Well, that segues nicely into the rest of the chapter, because the rest of the chapter is the trial,
Mhm.
and Morgase is presiding over this, and Perrin thinks when he looks at her, as soon as they walk in, she seems different, or Fail. It's either Fail or him or both are looking at her going, how did we ever think this person was just some lady's maid? Well, because that was the part she was playing at the time. But now she's who she actually is. And you actually, it was nice because you see a reversion back to when we first met her in the Eye of the World, when she's brought before Rand, and this is how she acts. She acts with wisdom, but also firmness. That she is at no point during this trial, or when we first see her, when Brine and Elida speak up and she says, no, I'm not going to have this kid thrown in a jail cell just because maybe you have a suspicion, or maybe there's some uncertainty there. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's free to go about his business. Um, so she speaks with firmness without being tyrannical. And the other thing I like about her in this scene here, and this is where the parallel between her and Gawyn came to me, is that they had both faced seriously hard times and incredible disappointments. You were not only, as Fail thinks when they learn who she is, not just a queen, but the queen, right? That Andor is one of the strongest, if not the strongest country in the continent. And Morgase in particular, that throne and Morgase in particular are held in very high esteem. And you see why here. But because she fell from so high, it very easily could have destroyed her. But much like with Gawyn and Perrin, and what Gawyn is lacking is that strong central core of who she is. That not just what she was, but who she is. That is how she's able to overcome and still act with the same level of, you know, integrity, firmness, wisdom that she had when she was a queen. She's able to step back into a similar, though it's not the same role, because deep in her core, she knows she can do this. She knows, she's the right person for the job here. The other thing I like about the trial, about how she concludes it, is she is both queen and mother, and she does both masterfully. Of this as she was telling Galad, when they were having their private moment together, this man is a good man, even if he does things I don't agree with. And this incident is probably more complicated than you think it is. And so she's able to find the right and just thing to do here, which is it. At first it's, oh, she found a legal loophole. Actually, no. I think that's the wrong way to read this. This is the most just verdict. It's not just, let me find some legal loophole so I can justify what I want to happen. Right? This is uh Stalin's head of secret police infamously said, "Show me the man and I will show you the crime."
Hmm.
Well, yeah, that is probably shouldn't go into the current events of what happened
Yeah, no, we'll,
yesterday,
we'll save
but
that
we'll
for
save
next
that
week.
for
Yeah,
later.
yeah,
But but we as people, that is the extreme, because you're talking about someone who was personally responsible for the death of thousands of people and the imprisonment of thousands more. Um, but we do that in our everyday lives of, I want to, let me find a justification for this thing I want to do, not is this thing I want to do the just thing to do, because she's not wrong here. This is, as Galad says, she essentially she rules that this was a quarrel, an unlawful quarrel between mercenaries. There were no good guys. There were no good decisions made. There were no good actions on anybody's part. But you still unlawfully killed two people, and that's a big deal. You ended the life of two people, so that's not nothing. So there should be a punishment for that, even if it isn't you go to the gallows because you committed murder. It can be that, as Morgase says, but be, the law is written to allow for more leeway because it's not as simple as you just killed two people, you murdered two people. It's not that simple. So since you are the aggrieved party, you are the leader of the White Cloaks. I'm putting the punishment in your hands.
yeah. This is one that I have to have a big talk with the young athletes. I'm going to say early 20s because this is the situation I'm talking about. They go out to the bars and they get in altercations sometimes. And, if I'm sorry, don't pick a fight with a professional athlete. They're professional athletes for a reason.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, but I always tell them, I'm like, sometimes evaluate the fight, man, because okay, so me, I have a wrestling background. My instinct is going to be to shoot in and pick somebody up and put them on their head, right? On a wrestling mat, you fight on. On the concrete outside of a bar, you might be dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not self-defense if two people square up. It's no longer self-defense. Someone just jumps you and you react, that's one thing. But if you're jawing back and forth and you get in a fight, if that person dies, you still are on the hook for that. And if you can throw the ball 105 miles an hour, how hard can your fist pound into somebody's face, right? You could kill somebody. And that's what they don't understand. It's like it's not about winning the fight. It's about living your life. If they attack you when you're walking back, it's self-defense. If you're squaring up with them because of your pride, it ceases to be self-defense. And that's the ruling that was given here. Like, yeah, they're both responsible for the deaths. Now we got to figure out how we're going to adjudicate that. Well, you kill somebody in a fight and it wasn't self-defense. That's manslaughter, my friends.
Mm-hmm. I also like on Galad's part, I love that the chapter ends with Perrin saying, "Wait, but you didn't pronounce punishment." And he just says, "No, I didn't," and then leaves because this is part of who Galad is. He needs to find the right answer. He needs to find what is the most just thing here, and he's
Well, and he
conflicted. So
and
he's
he
not
well, he
gonna.
already knows the right answer because it's because it's adjudicated to after the last battle. Well, the right answer is which side does he fight on? If Perrin fights on the side of good, obviously he wasn't Shadow Spawn.
Mhm.
if he fights against me, well, obviously he was shadow. He tells Bayer the same thing. He said if he's
It's
shadow
yeah,
spawn, we'll end up on.
in
I'll
the
get
very
to kill
next
him in battle.
chapter,
Yeah.
he's talking to Byron Bornhold and explains why he did what he did, why he didn't pronounce judgment, because the last battle is going to tell us a lot. All right. If he is the thing you say he is, Bayer, then fine. We'll be facing him in the last battle and he'll get his justice then. If not, well, then that needs to factor into my pronouncement of punishment. Um,
I'm going to
all
give
right.
Perrin credit here to Saki back to a comment I made earlier about because we're going into we've seen kind of back and forth some of Perrin and his learning the wolf dream. Here's where I'm going to give Perrin credit. Yeah, we had to go through it again, but at least Perrin was a much faster learner than Egwene
Mm-hmm.
because we didn't have to bear with it that long. So
Well,
he 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 picked it up pretty quick.
that is part of how he's learning, which we'll get to in a second, because there are definitely thoughts on that. All right, but page chapter 35. Uh, there's this again, good Egwene, bad Egwene moment of uh, we're not children, mother, Sawan said dryly. No, your Aes Sedai, nearly as bad at following directions. Sawan gave her a flat look, and Egwene regretted her words. They had been uncalled for. She was on edge. She calmed herself. Good Egwene, okay, but much like Elayne, you need to show it more. Like
Well, except
this is why,
that's been our critique of Aes Sedai. So there, I mean,
yes,
there is that. So
there is
she's
that,
not wrong.
but she's not wrong, but she didn't need to say it that way, and especially not to Sawan. You know, this is someone who could rightfully be called a close friend, not just a confidant, not just an ally. This is someone who has been a friend to you, and you're being a bitch. But much like with Elayne, it's good that you regret your words, but now let's see you actually act on that feeling. Again, this is why Nynaeve becomes such a strong and likable character, is because when she has these thoughts, she actually does something about it. You know, go back to her interaction with Brigitte after Brigitte gets ripped out of the world of dreams. And she is incredibly distraught about that. She actually changes her behavior and is acting out of character. Brigitte kind of has to smack her back into reality of, look, it's good that you regret what happened. Yeah, because it sucks. What happened sucks. But you still need to be you. You just need to be a you who's learned from this, is essentially what Brigitte tells her. And she does. Um, but again, good Egwene, bad Egwene, because then on the very next page, she asks if Gawyn has returned yet. And then says to send another letter, one with a more politely worded letter. Ask him to return, don't order it, is what she says. And then thinking, knowing Sylviana's opinion of Gawyn, Egwene was sure the original letter had been brusque. Then why didn't you do something about that when you first told her to send the letter?
Or
If you
write
knew
your
what
own
the
damn
tone,
letter.
or write your own.
Yeah.
If you knew what the tone was going to be, where's the thought of regret for that as well? Of ugh, I should have handled that differently. You know?
Well, the whole interplay there. He probably delaying to just to be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You know, oh, well, he's nothing but if not stubborn. Well, yeah, that's why you sent him
All right,
away.
pot and kettle.
Yeah. You sent him away for his stubbornness. Are you surprised you're gonna get stubbornness when you say
Mm-hmm.
come back?
Um,
They do deserve each other. I think that meme was
yep.
right.
And then we switch to Perrin's point of view, and this is the argument with Fael that I referenced earlier, that they get in a shouting match, and I feel like Perrin. This should be learning moment for Perrin, and I just wish we hadn't had the slog to sully this, because I kind of think it's appropriate that he instinctively acts the way he should with Fael here. Is this is the time, all right. Previously was not the time for an argument, was not the time for a fight, but now we have to, because this is something we are going to butt heads about, and she needs to know how I feel and how I think about this, and
Hmm.
vice versa, where Fael is going to shout back at him because he needs to know how I feel and how I think about this. So this interaction to me seems like very good Perrin and Fael, and I think it's appropriate that he kind of accidentally has this argument out in public, which previously he would have been really upset or hesitant to have a shouting match in public with his wife. But then he notices that people in earshot are nodding along. He has this thought of something to the effect of nodding along as if they hadn't thought about it like that until he vocalized it. Well, that happens sometimes. How many times have I said, "Man, it pisses me off that this person said this because it's so obvious in hindsight that I didn't think about it." That happens all the time. Because we get caught up in our own worlds and we get blinders on. So that to me is a nice progression because it's kind of giving him a clue of, oh, I'm growing here in this way, and now that's kind of teaching me how that can help me grow in my position as a leader. Uh, then it switches to Golod, which you'd referenced before, and I really
Hmm.
like this because as he's thinking here, oh, where is it? Finding answers should be easy. The right things always came easy to him. However, he's conflicted because uh, societally, technically, the right thing to do from the White Cloak perspective is, all right, he's guilty. He killed White Cloaks. He goes to the gallows, pronounce the punishment of death. But he instinctively understands that would not be justice in this situation. And so that's what the conflict is. It's not, that's what he's trying to figure out is, you kind of said it. No, he knows what the right thing to do is. He just doesn't know why it's the right thing. And that's what he's trying to figure out. And I think the interaction here between Bornhold and Bayer helps solidify that because you see Bayer the rabid dog, who has just been confronted with his own uh conflicts and hypocrisy, both in the trial and now here again, and yet he stubbornly refuses to budge. Contrasted with young Bornhold, who is suddenly, I don't know. I don't know anymore. I was so certain, and now I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that's where you have sympathy for Bornhold because he was getting the story from a very
Mm-hmm.
biased source.
Mm-hmm.
And he still remembers the story, but now he's seeing how biased the source is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a, but and it helps that he's contrasting that with Galad's behavior,
Mm-hmm.
where Galad's is, like you said, trying, let me get all the information I can. Well, getting Byers' description of what happened is the opposite of getting all the information you can because you have a guy who watched something from the other side of a battlefield
Mm-hmm.
when we know from book 5 that looking glasses weren't even invented yet because they were invented in book 5. And so he's watching from the other side of a battlefield where something supernatural happened, and there were thousands of people on each side, and then a big foggy cloud. And oh, by the way, the dragon reborn and what seemed to be the dark one in the air over the
Mm-hmm.
top of it. And you said, "Oh, I saw a Ibara, so he's probably the one."
And
Not the two people fighting in the sky over the battlefield.
mm-hmm.
They weren't responsible for any of it. Not the two armies that were going at each other. They weren't responsible for anything. I saw that one guy I have a vendetta against.
And as Galad points out, well, because Bayer insists, well, how else could the children have fallen to the Sanshin if not to have been betrayed by the dark? And Galad says, what the hell are you talking about? We have fought the Sanshin repeatedly lately and lost every time.
Hmm.
So
They actually have hold of Amadicia, by the way.
yeah.
It's
So even if you were certain that this was true at the time. You since have more information of because you personally have had to, go up against the Sanchin, and you know, so your own personal experience plus all the firsthand accounts from others who have fought them, others of the children who have fought them, you should have had your eyes opened, but you can't. But Bornhold can.
Hmm. Well, Bornhold's from good stock because Elder Bornhold actually had a lot of the same doubts.
Yes.
Yeah.
As Perrin said, I said he was a good man and I meant it. You know, I'm sorry your father is dead, even though, yeah, he wanted to kill me, but he wanted to do it out of a sense of justice, not
Hmm.
out of a sense of zealous hatred like Bayer. Um, okay. So then we go back to Perrin, who goes into the Wolf Dream to try and figure out and stop this dome, this thing that is blocking their gateways, because he's sure this is part of the trap that he kind of senses coming. And there's something that jumped out at me here that I don't think I'd noticed before, and I think it's a big effing deal, which is on page 550. Um, when Perrin gets into the wolf dream, he says it smells strange. Since blend, Hopper sent, like the waters of 1,000 streams. It is not natural, it is not good. And here, this like lightning bolt, because you've been talking so much about and focusing on the world of dreams and how important it is to the story and to the world, this place begins to break. Ruh-roh. Um, that would be bad. I wasn't even sure that was possible because it seems to me that the world of dreams exists separate from the pattern in some ways.
Well, that's what Varen explained.
Yeah, that's the way Varen explained it.
Yeah, there was
But
this thing outside of the creator, outside of the pattern that was the world of dreams. But we've been talking about that it might be the hub where it actually all comes together.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the fact that the Dark One's influence is able to start breaking even the world of dreams, that's a huge red flag. And also something to keep an eye on going forward as more World of Dreams things happen and as the confrontation with the Dark One happens, is keep that in mind that the Dark One is even breaking the World of Dreams.
Yeah, and this is kind of on the meta level where I just brought up the world of dreams earlier today about being kind of a metaphor to consciousness. Well, now we get into the argument of my truth.
Mm,
Well, if everything becomes the world of dreams, we cannot coexist because everything is about my perception of things. The water is not real. There is no
mm,
spoon, right? If we all live in that infinite possibility, nothing is real. And we're basically all die because your perceptions are going to conflict with each other. You're going to have bubbles of evil. It's going to start like
mm-hmm.
bubbles of evil. It's going to start like the nightmares that they did when all the sisters were trying to learn. It's going to start like that. And then eventually everybody's going to be dead, which is what the Dark One wants.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so then the next thing that jumped out at me,
Or would there end up a ruling class of people who can control it?
oh, well, there's that. Um,
Dark One's plan isn't so good anymore, is it?
so the three remaining wolves from this little pack, Oak Dancer, Sparks, and Boundless, show up to help with this fight. And Perrin says, "This will be dangerous. Wolves may die." Their sending back was insistent. Slayer must fall for what he has done. Together we are strong. Young Bull should not hunt such dangerous prey alone. He nodded in agreement. And the reason this jumped out at me is because you were the one to say Perrin needs to learn, find the true meaning and lesson of what it means to be the wolf, because he thinks it's the raging barbarian. He thinks it's the out of control monster, and that's why he has feared it and pushed it away for so long. And no, it's acting naturally. It's acting instinctively.
Not
And
only that, but
here,
also being part of a pack.
yes,
Yeah.
and wolves may die. Yeah, that reality sucks, and this reality really sucks because if you die here, you're dead. So it extra super sucks. But
Yeah, and that's the
now it's in
hard part
agreement.
about this whole thing is because you're
Yeah.
you're you're entering a pack where the people that you're as a leader, okay, so in his human world, he's taking his men into battle, but he can die too.
Hmm.
In this fight, the people that he is leading have a lot more to lose than he does.
Because even if he's grievously injured, there's still a chance he can pull himself out back into the
Hmm.
waking world and be healed. They can't.
Well, there's nothing that says these wolves aren't
Oh,
alive in
that's
the
a good
waking
point.
world.
That's a good point.
Hopper cannot,
Hopper cannot. Yeah.
but there's nothing to be said that they are well. And does it ever indicate that the wolf dream to real wolves is only when they're in between lives?
No, because I don't know. That's a good point.
Because do we ever see an instance where he talks to a pack in a dream and then also talks to the same pack in the waking world?
I feel like we have when he was first learning with Hopper earlier, but I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. I just think so.
Because maybe the back and forth while you're still alive in the waking world is only a human thing,
Mm.
where you're a wolf in the real world, kind of like Brigitte, where she would be in the world of dreams when she's in between
Yeah.
manifestations of her hero self.
So the learning here is leading, and again, it's such a darn shame that we had such a long slog and that it was such a slog to get here because this progression is good and it is needed, it is necessary, and it makes sense that this progression would happen this way, which is learning to be the pack leader and accepting that is going to be necessary to truly be the chief, as Gaul says, is that he's starting to become the chief. He's no longer rejecting it. You know, he's no longer pushing it away, but he still wants to. In order to truly assume that mantle, he has to learn to accept the part of him that is young bull. And as he thinks at the end of this chapter, as he's hunting down Slayer, as he's chasing after Slayer on page 554, young bull was part of the land itself. So he is acting on uber instinct here, so much so that he repeatedly shocks Slayer. Slayer is continually surprised by him and how deftly Perrin is able to move and act within the world of dreams. And it's because he is being so instinctual. All right. Um, I think it's probably the last chapter we'll do here because we then get into,
Well, and just from a time standpoint, it's a good place
yeah,
to stop.
more fighting here. The main thing is this meeting that Egwene has with the Windfinders and the Wise Ones to essentially formally propose what she's already talked about with Elayne and so on and Nynaeve of bringing all these women, these separate groups of women who can channel together to form a kind of coalition and partnership and help train each other. Um, and towards the end of it here, from Egwene's point of view, there's a lot of talking. Again, it goes well, and it's even though there's not action here, there wasn't a bunch that jumped out at me except that it once again reinforced how can Sanderson write dialogue so well and yet he writes monologues so badly because it is a it is a well written chapter and it's fairly lengthy and a lot of back and forth and yet it doesn't really drag. It all seems natural and it all flows pretty well.
Well, the answer to that might be simple. He knows how to talk to people, but he's never been a leader
Though yeah,
in
there's
real
that.
life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Um
that just might be, like we said, experience versus, he's
mhm.
read leaders' speeches, but he's never done it before.
But
Yeah.
I did want to point this out because to me this is good Egwene. This is why she had to be the one to be in charge of the tower for Tarmangaiden. The tower needs her at this moment, and it is because, as she tells the Yukiri and Leanne and Sane are the Aes Sedai who are here. and she's talking to them after the meeting, and Yukiri and Leanne, they don't like it. They're not so sure about this. There's a lot of things that could go wrong here. And Egwene says, the world as it was cannot be ours any longer. Was it ever? The Black Tower bonds Aes Sedai. The Isle no longer revere us. The Windfinders have hidden their best channelers from us for centuries and are becoming increasingly belligerent. If we try to hold too tightly to all of this, we will either become tyrants or fools, depending on how successful we are. I accept neither title. We will lead them, Yukiri. We must become a source that women look to, all women. We achieve that not by not holding too tightly, by bringing their channelers to train with us and sending our most talented accepted to become experts in the things they are best at. And uh and Leanne responds, and if they are saying the same thing right now, if they try to play us as we play them, then we will have to play the best, Egwene said. Um this is a big effing deal. This is a huge change in how the tower has acted for 3,000 freaking years. That's a long time for tradition to become ingrained. And it's not only the sharing of knowledge, but then also sharing of items of power. And the preamble to that is she makes the point, because the Terangriel is kind of a big sticking point. She makes the point they can be made again. Can we claim that all items of the one power belong to the White Tower? It it's not an accident that we here at the end of an age, all these incredibly rare talents are suddenly becoming more prevalent, rediscovered. My dreaming, Nicola's foretelling, Elayne being able to freaking make Terran big effing deal. The world is changing, and you had better that those who are entrenched within the tower can't or won't see that. And even if they do see it, they don't want to change with the changing age. They want to force the changing age to stay within the rules that they have established. And that's why Egwene is needed here. That's why she had to be, as she thinks in that confrontation with Rand, it's not an accident that I grew up friends and almost lovers with the Dragon Reborn, and now I'm the one who's Amarillan. The pattern brought us here for a reason. And it's not just that confrontation with Rand. It's not just dealing with Rand. It's dealing with all of these changes and making sure that the tower still exists on the other side and is still relevant on the other side. And that's going to require some major changes that the Aes Sedai can't or won't see. All right. And then there's some Perrin, and then he's headed to Tar Valon. And that's where the next chapter will pick up as the fight happens, or it's because at the end of the Egwene's point of view, there is Sawan jumping in and saying, "Help!" They didn't come to spy; they came to attack. And boy, howdy, are we in a fight!
Yep. All right.
Climax time, giggity.
Giggity, giggity, giggity. We got through a pretty good amount.
Yeah, yep. Um, I'm still optimistic that we might be able to finish it all next time, because so much of what happens in the next couple of chapters is just the fighting within the tower. And then we may take some time dealing with the aftermath of that, because that is important. And then there's some more fighting that happens towards the end. So we'll see how much we can kind of breeze past, because it's all action and fighting. But there's some big Perrin things that happen, so we will want to spend some time with that.
All right. Anything else before we go?
That's all I got. We will see y'all next time.
All right. We'll see you next time.